I've been pondering this for quite a while, and anytime you go on social media, there's a lot of confusion about a manager versus a leader, and oftentimes it tends to pit one against the other. And a lot of times it paints managers in bad lights. So I put them in a bad light, and that's not always fair to those who are managers. So I want to make sure we clear that up, because social media, and you may read it in articles or things people write, maybe even in some books, that leaders are way up here and managers are at the bottom and things of that nature. So there's a lot of things. Like one thing I particularly read recently, it read to the fact of the role of a manager is to control a group of people. Now in retrospect, I don't think a manager is intent to control a group of people, but that is how this particular thing that I read the other day stated it. Because control is a pretty strong word, and not one person should want to control somebody. But then it went on to mention how a leader is a person who has the ability to influence, inspire, motivate, things of that nature, which we all know. And so when you compare them both side by side, it makes this manager looks horrific, and that's not necessarily the case. So you don't want to make the manager look horrific. So good morning, everyone. I'm reading some of your comments. So that's not what you want. Or you'll see a manager have subordinates and leaders has followers. And in reality, that's really wordplay, right? So you can put that word and interchange them between a leader and a manager. And I know some people don't like the word subordinates, and I get it. I understand it. So, listening to a lot of you, I remember one live chat that I did last year. So I try to stay away from the word subordinate, which makes a lot of sense. Because although it is not a negative word, it presents itself that way sometimes. And so I can respect that. So, and then you also, one of the common statements that I read was, the question was, who is more important, managers or leaders? And it read, leaders are more important. And so again, it paints managers in a bad light, when in retrospect, first thing you need to remember, managers and leaders are mutually supporting, no matter how you look at it, because you need both in an organization. You cannot have an organization of managers with no leaders, and you cannot have an organization of leaders with no managers, because ultimately it will fail. Ultimately, both individuals have two different responsibilities, but sometimes they tend to blend together, which is perfectly okay. That is normal. So when you look at some of the differences, and there are countless differences between the two, but I would just touch on a few. Like one is a manager organization, whereas the leaders manage the people or lead the people and then influence them to achieve the organizational goals. And before I started the live chat, I put that we having a live chat, and someone made a comment, which is a true statement, which I was actually going to mention. A manager manages things, a leader leads people. You cannot manage people. They manage things, i.e. projects, tasks, things of that nature. And the leader feels that role of, okay, I'm going to take this and execute it. So another thing, when I said a manager manages things while leaders lead people, a leader's job is to influence. And not to say that managers can't do the same thing, but when you're trying to define the roles, a lot of times the things are interchangeable, and that's okay. So another difference is a manager knows the objectives, while leaders get down and dirty with the team and help accomplish those objectives. And again, there are so many differences, and again, not to pit one against the other, but managers are just as important to an organization as leaders are. Again, if you had no leaders in the organization, just people, or just all managers, someone within that group will have to fill a leadership role. Somebody, no matter how you look at it, they have to fill that role to fill that gap. And the same thing with managers. If you had no managers in the organization but leaders, someone will have to fill the role of a manager, or multiple people will have to fill that role of a manager to accomplish the organizational task. Again, they are mutually supporting. So I want you all to understand that. And sometimes something that's very important to remember is the roles are interchangeable. And it all depends on your hierarchy, where you are in your organization. So let's say, for instance, you are, let's say at the bottom tier, You might be a worker, then all of a sudden you get a leadership role and things of that nature. So as you go up the chain of hierarchy, your role changes a little bit. So now you're this hard-charging manager and you like to get down and dirty and do things of that nature. But as you move up the chain, your priorities shift a little bit. Now, in most cases, not all cases, you will have to fill the primary role of a manager. Doesn't mean you can't lead, doesn't mean you're not a leader, it doesn't mean you don't do things that a leader would do, but your primary job is to manage the priorities of the organization, while those other members of your team or the leaders within your team, they're responsible for executing and making these things happen. So it is a difference. Again, it doesn't mean you can't do both, because both are interchangeable in so many ways. You can fill the role of a manager for, let's say, 5 years, and you're a high senior level manager, but there are sometimes you're gonna have to come from behind that desk and get down and dirty and lead those individuals. Or the individuals that you lead, or the individuals that are on your team who are leaders, you're gonna have to mentor, mold, and develop them too. So you're gonna have to pull up all your leadership traits and principles while leading them and managing part of the organization at the same time. So I'm reading, is it our job as leaders to create more followers? And our managers help lead all. So Amber, that is one role of a leader, and a leader has many roles. In retrospect, they have countless roles. Yes, you create more followers, but in the process of creating those followers, you got to develop, mentor, train those individuals to accomplish tasks. So you got to show them how to do things. And in the process, at the end state, you are creating leaders. But they have to be followers first. They have to find their role in the food chain, and then eventually aspire to not just to get to where you are, but go beyond to where you are. So hopefully that answers your question. So yes, your job is to help create more leaders, but that's only a small fraction of your job as a leader. That is just a tiny portion. Ultimately, that is your end state. Before you get to the end state, there are so many things that takes place filling the role of a manager and leader before you create those other leaders. And also, it's based on your action, it's based on things you do. Because remember, you as a leader or even a manager, people follow you and watch what you do at all times. Your actions, they pay attention to your actions all the time. They pay attention to how you talk to people, how you treat people. They pay attention to your mannerisms. They pay attention to, how you communicate with your team. They pay attention to, the work or the accolades you may give, or the lack of accolades you may give to team members. They pay attention to all of that. And in the process, they learn what to do and what not to do as a leader when they become that individual who fill that role. And so they are learning, and in turn, yes, you are creating more leaders. So I want you to understand that. And also, every organization layout is different. So you have to understand the layout of the organization, organizational goals, and things of that nature, and know where you fit in as a leader. Know where you fit in as a leader, but also know where you fit in as a manager, and know where you fit in as a team member. So know your role no matter where you are within this hierarchy, and help each other accomplish the task. So you have to remember that everybody is mutually supportive. And one thing about leaders, everybody say, yeah, we are leaders. Well, if you have no followers, leaders are not needed. What good are you if you have nobody to lead? So in turn, what do you do at that point? This is something for you to think about. So yes, so managers usually get a sort of a bad name sometimes, and in retrospect, they don't necessarily rate a bad name. So, and even same thing, another word that comes to mind that I want you to think about that hasn't, people think it as a negative word is the word boss. When people say boss, oh, I don't want to be a boss, I want to be a leader. You may hear stuff like that. Okay, that's fine, but by definition, when you look at the word boss, it's a person who's in charge of people or an organization. So keep that in mind. So it's not necessarily the word boss. But people may say, oh, this is my boss. And usually when they say that, it's normally in terms of endearment, if they're introducing you to somebody and things of that nature. So people get wrapped around, oh, I don't want to be a boss. I'm a manager, I'm a leader, I'm not a boss. Yeah, you probably technically are a boss. However, this is what I want you to remember though, of all that. It's a difference between being a boss And there's a difference between being bossy. I want that to resonate for a minute. Just because you're bossy doesn't mean you're a boss. And when you're bossy and people, it affects people and how you talk to people, you don't talk to them with respect or treat them with respect, and you just bossing, you nag and you complain, don't give no praise, they will tend to lose respect for you as their supervisor, their leader, their mentor, their boss, and then you will get a negative name, whatever that name may be. So that's something that I want you to think about. So that is the difference. So maintain respect for your people at all times, regardless of the role that you hold. You need leaders just as much as managers, and managers just as much as leaders. You need people to fill in the gaps in between. They are all equally supporting. So no matter where you fall in this level of hierarchy, at the end of it, you treat everybody with respect. You treat everybody with respect. You work together as a team to help accomplish the organizational goals. You don't treat no one person better than the other. You all treat them the same. And that's a whole nother story, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I want to make sure I touch on that. That's been on my mind for a little while. I know a lot of you ask, because people tend to watch this, or they watch it after the live chat, and then they make comments and I don't respond. Well, that means it's no longer live chat, it's a recording. And then also people would ask, how can I send this to people because they don't have Facebook? What I usually do is take this video and put it on YouTube, and then I share the YouTube link. So if you wanted to share it with somebody that way, that you can share the YouTube link. But humility, yes. Humility, that is one of, to me, there's many most important leadership traits, and we're gonna talk about, eventually I'm gonna have a chat on leadership traits and principles and things of that nature sometime in the near future, but yes. Humility, let me rephrase it. Humility is something that you should have at all times, no matter where you are. If you are the CEO of a company, you run a Fortune 500 company, or you're the person who's taking out the trash, you have the same amount of humility and respect for everybody, no matter where you are on that food chain. Let me see. Hey, time out. You have a boss who micromanages and it's toxic. That is the problem. So with the terms that you use, then that will fall under a toxic category for the word boss. And you probably heard the saying, I can't remember who made the initial quote, but it is pointless to hire all these great individuals with all the best talent and you're going to turn around and micromanage them. Unnecessary. But other than that, thank you. You all have a great day.